There are presenters here that are professional presenters, and then there are those of us that just have a lot of passion and want to contribute something. In full disclosure, I've got to tell you, when I wondered whether or not I should do this today, my husband promised me it would be a classroom of 20 people. So forgive me if I'm not as smooth as a lot of the people that you will see today. I do want to start out by saying thank you. Thank you to Steve Lorenz, who is very, very important and the reason I'm here today, as well as Superintendent Lieutenant General Michelle Johnson and the Dean Brigadier General Andy Armacost. But I must say, everybody has worked so hard to put this symposium together, and it is so large. You do have some great leadership. And as I like to say, if you go out of here today with just one small new idea, it could be worth a lot. You know, so I'm not here to try to rock your world or shake your perspective, but perhaps I can give you one new insight, and that's my goal today. I'm here to share a little bit about my life. This remarkable life that God has given me is proof that anything is possible, and that you can live through horrific situations, never lose sight of what is important, and always be able to reclaim your identity, your dignity, and your respect. As you have already heard, I was born in Lima, Peru. My father was American, my mother was Peruvian, and I was the first white one in the family. They didn't know what to do with me. I can still hear my aunts going, there she goes, turning red again in the sun. I don't know, you think it's an allergy? They used to cover me with calamine lotion. You know, I don't know if you know that, but they really thought I was allergic to the sun. You know, you just go with it. I was the little ugly duckling, it's okay. You know, when Casper was popular, they called me I just kind of blended in with the pictures, and all you could see was a smile, you know? That's okay, I was a happy child. The thing about it is my father, and you know, how did he get down to Peru, right? He was the original Indiana Jones. I mean, when I saw the movie, I thought, they interviewed Dad, they even have the hat right. You know, except for he had a gun, not a whip, you know? But you guys will probably enjoy this story more than most because he graduated from DU. They were homesteaders. Dad was 55 when I was born, so he had quite a large history. And he became a chemist metallurgist engineer. And then he went down to Colorado Springs, had a little claim in Cripple Creek. And what this is all leading to is he became a pilot in 1930 from his little gold mine. And he decided he wanted to work in the largest gold mine in the world, which at that point was Cerro de Pasco in Peru. And so he got his little Super Cub in 1930, and he flew from Colorado Springs to Peru. And he continued to say that the hardest part was going over Pikes Peak and finding gas along the way. So you all have something to look forward to when you do become pilots, if that is your goal. Anyway, Dad worked for the largest gold mine, but in his spare time, he would go find and search mines. And he was one of the first white people to learn Quechua. Quechua is the language of the Incas. And so he would follow the trails of the Incas and developed a gold mine, a silver mine, and a copper mine. Back then, gold was $35 an ounce. And so he lost money on the gold mine. It was still a source of argument between my parents. And I remember him saying, Ana Maria, someday this gold mine will be worth something. You know, too bad he wasn't around to see the gold go up as high as it has. But his passion was emeralds. He always wanted to find an emerald mine. And he followed every Quechua, every Inca trail to the emerald mines of the Incas. And unfortunately was not able to do that. But I grew up a very, very privileged little girl. You know, I went to an all-girls Catholic nun school, and it was hard to get in. At 2 years old, we had our first interview. Have you ever heard of such a thing? At 4, we had our second interview. And it was the prime, you know, school. And I had 2 responsibilities as a child. Number 1 was to study hard, and number 2 was to be kind. And it was very well defined. You know, that was it. Those were the 2 things I had to do. But what I will say, looking back, is the one thing that the nuns taught me was discipline, which is the one thing that I see over and over again when I go to any of the military bases, is we really can grow so much faster and better when we understand discipline and when we have it in our lives. And I admire you for doing what you're doing, if nothing else, for the discipline you will gain. So it was a good life, but everything changed in October 3rd, 1968, when General Juan Velasco took over in what history will, in some books, say it was a bloodless coup. I hope and pray that you never have to live through a coup. And I'm not even sure how they would do it today, because our informational system is so different. But back then, the first thing that they did is the military took over, all the phones were cut, all the mail was cut, the telegraphs were cut, the radios were cut. There was no way to communicate with the outside world. You just went black. And like I said, I think it'd be much more difficult to do today, but I bet you they could still find a way to contain you. So you wake up one morning and life has changed. And the worst part of it is that General Juan Velasco hated Americans. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I kind of look like an American. So this was not good for my family. The soldiers, the first thing that happened is the soldiers came and took my dad away. And I will never forget the feeling of having soldiers take your father away when you've done absolutely nothing wrong. The thing is, we didn't know where they were taking him. And in Peru, we don't have the death sentence, but when you go to jail, you're not treated quite the same way you are here. And one of the things is you can have rice and beans, but you can't have any other food unless your family comes and pays for it. I don't know if it's changed today, but that's how it was then. And so I remember as a child desperately going from jail to jail, trying to find out where my father was, where they had taken him. In reality, the government didn't want any problems with the American embassy. So what they did is they took him to the airport and they said, you have a choice. You can fly out on the next flight or you can go to jail. Well, Dad was smart. We've already covered that. So he took off on the next flight. But they were cruel because they wouldn't let him send us a note, make one last phone call. They wouldn't let him tell us where he was. So consequently, the anxiety grows as you think that your loved one is suffering somewhere or has been killed. There's a lot of killings going on. As a matter of fact, so much so that they were trying to save on bullets, so they would fly people up and just throw them off the airplanes. You know, it's interesting how history records things. You know, I remember, and they say bloodless, and here's my memory, is every time we went to school, you know, besides dodging the bullets, literally, because there were bullets flying everywhere, and it gets to the point where you hear bombs exploding, and you go, well, where do you think that was? Do you think that was 1 block or 2 block? And then you go, who do we know there? Who do we know that we need to pray for, because we couldn't even call to see if they were okay? And you'd get to school, and all you'd hear is crying. Because you see, Peruvians are a group people. We're tactile too, but we're group people. And what the government had said is, if there were more than 3 young men gathered, they could all be shot down. So, you know, we had curfews and everything else, but what happened was 2 of the young men would be going down one side of the street, 2 of the young men would be going down the other. They're 15-year-olds. You know, they see each other, they wave, they get together, and they all got gunned down. So we go to school, and a lot of the girls had lost their brother. I'd lost my father. We didn't know what was coming next. And I think that you have to juggle these emotions of tremendous fear and anxiety and just let it go, because it can drive you nuts. just the not knowing who's going to get killed next, not knowing where you will be next. So the first thing then after Dad was taken away was that my auntie and my sister were able to escape. My auntie was American. She had to leave Peru anyway. Her visa was revoked. And then what happened was the soldiers came to our house and they said that that ugly American had abandoned us. And because he had abandoned us, the government was going to take care of us. And the government was going to nationalize all the mines, all the bank accounts, all the properties, all the laboratories, everything. And they were going to allow us to live in the house. And they would make sure we were okay. Well, what that meant to us is there was no money for food. Because they weren't going to make sure that we were eating. So, you know, it was difficult times. Times I hope you never have to live through. When they figured out that my sister wasn't coming back, was about 6 months after she had escaped. So it took them a little bit of time, which I was grateful for. But eventually they found out that she wasn't coming back, which was not what the government had wanted and ordered. And so we were put on what was considered the black list. The black list meant that the soldiers could come in, beat us up anytime they wanted, take anything they wanted, and you know, there was no one to help. This is the authorities. And it becoming increasingly difficult to hide the fact that I was a girl. My mom tried to cut my hair off and make sure I looked like a boy, and I was never supposed to look at anybody in the eyes so they couldn't see my blue eyes. But let's face it, I'm pretty pale. So no matter where we went, the soldiers were able to spit on us and hit us, and that was, you know, the way it was. And my mom knew that the day was coming that she would no longer be able to protect me, and I had to get out of there. And thanks to the American Embassy, what I didn't know is that Dad had gotten me birth certificate, an American birth certificate. So I was indeed a total mutt. Yay! Mutts are smart, okay? Just saying. So I was able to get an American passport and a Peruvian passport. The Peruvian government didn't know of my American passport. And there came the time when I had to leave. And the thing about it is, you know, you wonder, well, how did a mother part with an 11-and-a-half-year-old and say goodbye and not know if she'd ever see her again or not? And it's called love, right? It's called survival. And by that time, I had changed. And you cannot endure 3 years of war without changing. It's self-protection. You don't feel things as much. You know, we had been caught up in this, downtown Lima, we had been caught up in this civil uprising, if you will, where there were guns, you know, going off everywhere. My mom was so fast. And she grabbed me, and we went into this boutique and locked the door. And I'll never forget, this man was running away and was trying to get in the boutique, and the lady that owned the boutique was down on the floor, and she said, if your daughter moves, we're all dead. And I saw him get killed, I don't know, as far as you are from me, and die, and there was blood, the red color everywhere, and my mom kept saying, that's just coloring water, honey. That's just coloring water. That red will be washed off, no worries. And this is what it's like. You know, you're 9, you're 10, you're 11, and this is what it's like. And it does change you. So I get on the plane, and the plane is primarily full of Americans, and at this point I know 2 words. I know apple, and I know bathroom. Those are important words, okay? So the gentleman that sat next to me, which was probably about my age, which back then was really old, and he sat next to me, and we took off, and he didn't know much Spanish, I didn't know much English, and he was trying to make conversation. But he knew that something was just not right about me, you know? He just couldn't figure it out. And as we were flying over Ecuador, Quito was going through a civil revolution too. And they announced that we were going to do a touchdown, a touch and go, and pick up some Americans from the tail. And we were to assume the crash position. And I have to tell you something, when you are 11 and a half and you look out the window and there's bombs exploding, it's really pretty. I don't think I was quite altogether there. But I remember the man, and he looked at me and he said, "Are you scared?" And I said, "No, if I die today, God will take me home." That is what you adopt. You have to understand that life is that quick, that you could die at any minute, and that you have to be okay with that. He cried. And it really bothered me that he cried. You know, here was this 50-year-old gentleman, and I was okay, and it took me 30 years to figure out that that was just probably not a normal 11-and-a-half-year-old reaction. And he probably figured out I had endured a lot of abuse. So we picked up Americans, and we left, and I went to Panama. And in Panama, I was to change identities. And, but Panama, the airports were open back then, and Panama had a huge child slave. We won't go into more. And so I had been told, you have got to go straight to the counter. But I told you I wasn't typical at that time, and I just wanted to see a little bit of Panama. However, quickly I realized there was someone following me. And you know, as a child of war, you just develop that. You know what's going on in your surroundings a lot more than normal. It's what you do. And so I remember thinking, okay, he's tall, he's strong, I'm not. So I opened the door. Oh, I probably forgot to tell you, I weighed 0.nothing back then. You know, I probably didn't even look 11 and a half because there was no food. And I opened up the door and I said, "Mamá, ya estás lista?" You know, in the bathroom door I went, "Mother, are you ready?" And that made him back up just a second. And that gave me enough time to run to the counter, and I was bad girl because I went straight to the front. And I said, "I'm Luisa." And the guy, I'll never forget, he reached over, he grabbed me by the shirt, he pulled me up across the counter and said, "Where have you been?" You know, I knew I was not a good little girl at that point, but he let me board the plane that was going to Costa Rica, and I got to follow this beautiful stewardess. I swear I thought she was an angel. And, you know, and I went to Costa Rica. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, even through the horrific things that happen, you can always find joy. You might have to look really hard for it, but you can always find those moments of joy. I really was happy following that stewardess around. I thought she was just great. So, you know, you just have to find it in the little things. Escaping Peru was hard, but probably not as hard as you think it would be. You know, I met my dad. He also cried. You know, I was numb at that time. I was starved, I was very sick, and I was very scared. And then there was the dentist. As though life had not been cruel enough, I had cavities in I had 42 cavities. And Dad told me we had, oh yes, and an infection, oh yeah. Well, we didn't have toothbrush. You don't think of these things. You know, and Dad told me we had to fix my teeth before we came to America because Americans would notice. He did. He made me go to the dentist, and his motivation was, "You want to make friends, don't you, honey?" Americans don't make friends with people that have that many cavities. Let's fix you up. So, you know, so I was excited. I got to come to America, and the dentist fixed me up. Coming to America was very, very difficult. We had no money, we had no status, we had no friends. And then there were the American girls. They were scary. I know you don't think of yourself so scary, but from a Peruvian girl looking at you, you are very scary. An entirely different culture. How many of you have studied a second language? How many of you, leave your hands up if you think you understand a second language? You don't until you understand the culture. You think you understand the language, but you have to understand the culture to understand the language. And you've really, truly gotten there. You know how you know when you've really gotten to be good and proficient in a second language? You understand the jokes. They're the hardest ones to understand. You know, it's just, so anyway, I guess one of the takeaways today would be kind to immigrants. You don't know how scary you are. You know, any immigrants here, I take it, besides me? Yeah, baby. It's scary. You know, the thing about it is, on a side note, my parents would never take any government aid. First of all, my mother wasn't here. I lived with my 72-year-old aunt. Talk about a saint. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine being 72-year-old and having a war-torn 12-year-old, angry 12-year-old living with you? Who might have been a little bit hyper, I don't know. Well, she was a saint, and she taught me a lot about kindness, compassion, understanding, and all the things that I think are part of honor. We lived in a shack behind a house. It was a tool shack, and we lived there. And I think I already told you, we had a pretty big mansion in Peru. You know, when you have 3 mines and laboratories, you kind of have a big house. So going from war, no food, to America, to a shack. I'm sorry, but I'm not sure at a 12-year-old I could have told you which was worse. I think I would have rather lived in the big mansion and dodged bullets, literally. You know, your priorities are kind of different. I was confused. I was lost. I was angry at everything, including God. How could this be right? Why had God abandoned me? It is a paradox, I believe, that you can be both mad at God and love him dearly, not understanding what is happening or why. We're never abandoned, no matter what our circumstances, and that was to be my first lesson. I was mad at God, yet I kept my faith. Faith encouraged by angels among us. So we all have a little bit different, perhaps, definition of what an angel is. But if I was to explain 2 situations, perhaps you would agree with me. Remember, going back, I told you we didn't know what had happened to Dad? That Dad was gone, and you just don't know. Maybe he was thrown off an airplane and dead, and you're still looking for him. I will never forget, when Dad was in Costa Rica, he would come to the airport. There was 1 flight coming to Peru a week. And he would go to the airport to find somebody that was willing to come to us and tell us Dad was alive and in Costa Rica. And you know, nobody wants to get involved. Would you have gotten involved? And so I don't know timelines. I'm sorry, I don't. But there was a point where this man came to our house, a man I had never seen before or since, and I swear to you, he glowed. And he told us that Dad was alive, and that Dad was in Costa Rica, and that he was trying to figure out ways of communicating. He gained nothing. We had nothing to give him but our gratitude. Knowing that Dad was okay gave me hope. I consider that an angel. And then the second one, it's really, I consider her a saint, was my auntie, who at 72-year-old, like I said, she was taking care of my sister and myself. but I still had to cope with the American culture. And I'll tell you a quick story about Peruvians. We are extremely tactile. If you stand close to me, I guarantee I will touch you. I can't help myself. You know, I was already touching you, going, ooh, pretty, and I'll touch your hair. When I was a little girl, I was walking through El Mercado, and people would touch my hair. If you're ever in another country, just get used to it now. And people tried touching my eyes. I'm like waving them off, going, no, I don't think so. My cousins had me convinced I saw everything blue. I don't see the way most people do. I see everything blue. It's like, okay. You know, so we're a very tactile person. And I went to school. I still was not very good with English. There was no such thing as English as a second language, and I still am conflicted about that. But, because I do believe in submersion, by the way. But I was sitting behind a little girl that had really dark, beautiful skin. God had made her really dark. And I was fascinated by this. And so, you know, when no one's looking, I just thought I'd touch a little bit of it. You know, so I went like that to her skin, and she didn't like it, and she flipped my finger over and stabbed me with a pencil, and I still have the lead poisoning 30 years later. That taught me I'm not supposed to touch. You know, I think that the second thing that I learned rather quickly is that you're not supposed to talk or touch. I'll tell you another story, but it's a little bit off color. Is that okay? Why not? You've already told us everything, you know? No. So Peruvians kiss on the cheek. We kiss. And that's the polite thing to do. You don't not kiss, because that would be ignoring. That'd be terrible. So, of course, I go to school, and they introduced me to another little girl, and I kissed her on the cheek. And she said, oh, my God, you lesbian. And I said, no, es Luisa. Es Luisa. Sometimes it's good not to know what you don't know. You know, the culture. But I learned pretty quickly I needed to shut up, not touch, and observe. Because I did want to become American. I did. And the only way to do that, you know, is by watching people. So that's the second lesson. When you guys get shipped off to another culture and you think you know the language and you think you know the culture, shut up. Don't touch and observe. You'll be safer that way. And when I finally started to understand the culture, I realized this is an incredibly awesome country. Oh my gosh. I needed money. I was 14 by then. I knew that my parents couldn't help, so I got a job. You guys, in Peru, people wait for 2 hours in line for the opportunity to work one afternoon. I got a job. At 14, this is really cool. I wanted to go to college. We didn't have any money. They told me there was such things as scholarships. I got a scholarship. I went to college. This is really cool. Do you see the opportunities? It's amazing. Things were good. Faith in angels. My second lesson was to be the importance of them in our lives. God calls us to walk in faith no matter what. And there are angels among us when we're careful to listen. Listen through prayer. Sometimes God gives us the privilege of being like an angel to others. And that is so cool that each and every one of you will have that opportunity. If we have the courage to act on it. And everything was better, right? No? No? I had this naive belief that because I had such violent years in my childhood, years of pain and starvation, that the rest of my life was going to be easy. I like that. Well, I fell in love while I was at Claremont, too young, too fast. We are married. I quit college because that's what a Peruvian girl is supposed to do. I returned to Colorado Springs, became a minority partner in a jewelry store. For some reason, I was chosen to be a leader at the age of 23. which is just about the age you guys will be, isn't it? Had 2 boys, though I was told when I was 14 I could never get pregnant, so don't listen to the doctors. No, I'm kidding. I went to Mass every week, and then my husband sang in the choir. We led marriage encounter. We were the perfect couple, and it all looked great from the outside, and my sister was still my best friend. Life intervenes, guys. It always intervenes. My sister was killed in a horrible car accident. A car drove over her. 4 days later, my mom died in my arms. And that was all my family. My dad had died when I was 19. Everybody was dead. I was literally an orphan at the age of 31. And at that point, all I had was 2 beautiful boys and sadly a very abusive husband. My supposedly business partner defrauded the company and took all the money. And then my husband's business burned to the ground. I'm not kidding. He filed for bankruptcy even as he was having affairs with other women and drinking all night. I was broken, spiritually and physically and financially. I had been beaten up again, yet I had done nothing wrong. And this time I had 2 little guys that relied on me. I had to get up and start over with the love of my boys whom I adored. Lesson number 3, life is hard. It's filled with ups and downs. Sometimes you create that by the choices you make, but sometimes it is created for you by others. It is the human condition. I cannot escape it. You cannot escape it. Sorrow, grief, disappointment, it will find you. But it need not define you. God gives us the support we need to seek Him out. This is a great lesson of hope and encouragement. Remember one thing, you are all stronger than you think. Faith in angels again. A dear friend reintroduced me to my husband, my soulmate. I actually met him when I was 12 years old and came to this country before I knew English. He says I was a lot more quiet back then. And yes, in full disclosure, he's a naval grad. And sadly to say, he's pretty darn happy about, the Commander-in-Chief trophy. I didn't say that, he did. He put it in here, okay? He made me say that. 2 of our sons served in the Navy, and we are so proud of them, like we are proud of each and every one of you. My husband and I have been married for 11 years, and in that time we've only had 2 fights. It is possible. I'm here to tell you that. Keep working on your communication skills and compassion. That goes a long way. I'm no longer alone. Together we have 5 kids, 6 grandkids, great for holidays. The business is flourishing. We have broken all sorts of records in our industry, always with integrity. The truth is powerful. That's one of my favorite things to say. The truth is powerful, no matter how horrific it might be. I'm a speaker and a consultant, and I keep growing as a leader. Your leadership style, guys, will change after 30 years, just saying. You think you might know it all at 23, but you don't. You learn a thing or 2. We are surrounded by friends in a community that we love. I work with my son, and that's a dream come true. And by the way, we've only had 1 fight in 2 years. Not bad, eh? Yes, I do keep score, apparently. I don't think I should, but we know that even as we seek happiness and peace in this world, God is calling us to be angels to others, however we define being an angel. That is probably what I want to share most with you. My life has not been about hardships, disappointments, and setbacks, even if they're an interesting part of the story. Rather, these have been used by God again and again to get my attention, to restore my faith, and to focus on Him. His grace and love for us is eternal, as are our opportunities in this amazing, amazing country. These hardships that I endured forged me into the leader that I have become. Even at an early age, like you will be called upon to be a leader. I never compromised my faith, my integrity, even when situations and beatings were compromising me. They can touch my body, but they couldn't touch my soul. Many of you have already lived through traumatic experiences. And if you haven't, chances are you will. Actually, getting here was probably traumatic for many of you. And if not, being here is traumatic, right? Okay, don't answer that. Life has a way of humbling us all. And as leaders, you have to work around your pain because people are depending on you. You have to leave it at the door. That's not to say you bury it, guys. You have to deal with these situations, and sometimes that requires a guide, a counselor, a life coach, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes that guide that can help you make sense of of experiences that are like madness that you've experienced, and help you learn from them. I know you're all smart. If you weren't smart, you wouldn't be here. But what about your emotional intelligence? The good news, and I do love this part, by the way, is that your emotional intelligence can grow for the rest of your life. Do you know that? Your IQ is like set, but your emotional intelligence, it's open. You can take it as far as you want to take it. There's a lot of good books, just saying. But you have to invest in that growth. The best leaders I know all have tremendous emotional intelligence, as well as compassion and a sense of humor. You gotta be able to laugh at yourself. It is the most important thing I can imagine. Horrible events in life can happen to good people. I hate that, but it's true. They will change you, but they need not define you. Unlike what Hollywood and other people will say, oh yeah, he's a bad guy, had a bad childhood, what do you expect? It's like, no, wait a minute, stop. Doesn't need to be that way. You can overcome it because you are strong. Even though we hope not, chances are that at some point in your life, you will be impacted and challenged and called upon to respond with courage and with faith. That may be all that keeps you alive. And I would add compassion. Be mindful and aware of the many lives that you will impact. For better or for worse, that shall be your choice. Through the authority and power that will be vested in you as military officers in faith, you can be that loving, intelligent leader that gets their team to safety and to success. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for embarking on a life of honor.
Miss Luisa Graff, thank you for your message. Your life story was truly inspiring. At this time, I would like to open the floor for questions. I will announce last question as we approach 10 minutes remaining in the session.
Oh, come on, don't be shy. The question was, did I see my mother again? And the answer is yes, thank you. Once the government took everything that they wanted from us, and that is why we were targeted, really, is because we were high-profile Americans. Once the government took it all, after I escaped, my mother was able to go and live with her family and get away from that blacklist. So she was safer when I was gone. And it took 2 years, and then the government let her go. Thank you for asking. Yes, sir.
Dr. Smith told us in the opening session that when he talked to somebody that's been through combat, they said dodging bullets is not easy, but sometimes the circumstances of your life and the challenges of having to tell somebody the truth can be just as challenging. So I'm wondering if you would comment on that in business. You said you've been able to do your business with integrity. I suspect there's been some challenges that may not be bullets flying, but challenges as well. And do you think that the way you were raised and the way you grew up, having that physical courage and having to overcome that has helped equip you to deal with some of the maybe not as dramatic but equally important ethical challenges?
Well, first of all, that's a fantastic question. They asked me to reword it, but it's too good and too long to reword it, so forgive me, I'm just going to answer it. Dodging bullets as a child, you just accept that you're going to die. Every day that you wake up, you accept you're going to die that day. Because I'm sorry, I'm not smart enough at 10 years old to see a bullet coming. And they were hitting people all around me, so I figured one of them was likely to hit me. So as far as that, how did that affect my integrity and my honesty? Well, I will tell you that when I became more and more American, probably by the age of 14 or 15, I locked up all my memories. I put them all away. I was truthful in the moment. You know, I was always had that integrity, that desire to always be truthful. And, you know, I was brainwashed into believing that if you told a lie, it was going to catch up to you anyway. And I still believe that. I can't keep up with how do you keep up with what you've told one person and another if it's not just what you believe to be the truth? But then you wonder, did I live a lie? Because I totally put so many memories away. And it wasn't until I was 28 that I started getting flashback. They call it post-traumatic stress syndrome. And I was reliving it. I mean, it's pretty weird. You can even smell it. You can smell the gun smoke. You know, you can smell things. And they come back in nightmares, and they come back in flashbacks. And so I had to go to counseling, and I said, why now? You know, I've got 2 little kids, I've got a business, I'm busy, I don't have time to deal with this. And that's exactly why now. God gives you this ability to take really traumatic, horrific events sometimes and put them away and unpack them when you are in a safer place. When you are, at 28, I was in a safer place, and I was an adult. And I could unpack those child memories as an adult. And that was a gift, because accepting all of who you are helps you grow. If you are constantly denying a part of you, it takes a lot of energy. And a lot of us get very sick. Your health suffers because you're spending all your energy in trying to say, oh, no, that wasn't me. That didn't really happen. No. You know, but it did happen. So did all that help me to be more honest in the long run? Probably, because there's no fear left, right? Well, there's still fear and anxiety, whatever. You know, those are still emotions. You can't you have to deal with them. But I've always told my children, I've always told everybody in my teams, you know, truth is the most powerful thing we have. It releases you. And it helps you to be better. And it does give you power in knowing that you've always done the right thing, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Before your talk today, I visited your website and saw that your company has a really strong no conflict diamond policy. I was just curious, to hear more about that system. How you ensure that, and how we,
Okay, so the question has to do with conflict diamonds and the fact that we're very involved in no conflict diamonds. And, you know, maybe we should take a step back and say, what are conflict diamonds and how did we even find out about them? And as I told you guys, my father was a miner. Sometimes I tease that God made me exactly to what I'm supposed to be. You know, I was a biology major. I was going to go into research and find the world. You know, when I was 30, I was really depressed that all I was a jeweler. Really? Really, Lord? Retail? You know? And so, you know, you've got to flower where you're planted. You've got to do the best that you can. And so I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, by gosh, by golly, I'm going to be the best I can be. And no, that's a lie. I normally say I'm going to be the best. A little competitive, maybe, but, you know. So I got very involved in the Jewelers Vigilance Committee, and I got very involved in our industry is fantastic in the fact that it's very multicultural. It's very, very, you know, there was a book written, something about the world's not flat anymore. And I looked at my husband and I said, Toto, the world's never been flat to me. You know, we've always been, this is an industry that always works with a lot of different, and it provides so many jobs. And I know this because I'm the daughter of a miner. And there's places that would not live, little towns that would not eat were it not for a little mine. So how do you balance knowing that you are providing work all over the world with making sure that you're not providing the wrong work all over the world? So we first found out about the conflict diamonds probably in the late 80s, way before Hollywood. And quite honestly, there weren't that many. Now, one is one too many. If you guys know what conflict diamonds is, it means that they were taking some diamonds to support terrorism in some countries. And the terrorism was very wicked, and it really reminded me of Peru with what happened with the children, because the children were forced to kill their parents in some villages. And in the mountains that happened with the Shining Path, if you ever heard about the Shining Path, who really wanted Maui communism. Anyway, it messes with your brain forever, okay? Just saying. And they were doing that to gain more terrorists. That's how you raise them, right? You make them really angry children. And we were finding out that they were pretty much going to Russia. You know, they weren't coming straight to America. There was a lot of them, most of them were staying in Europe, but once in a while you got one come to America. But the thing about it is that even as big as this industry is, it truly is very well controlled. And so you just contract with mines that you know are solid, which means they're very well guarded. I'm sorry to say, but the security systems are incredible in some of these places. And the quality of life might not be what you think is okay, but for a third world country, it is okay. And that's where culture comes in, and that not judgmental, you know, trying to understand, seek to understand first. So I know that we don't deal with any. At this point, I don't think that there's any conflict diamonds really coming to America. But in addition to that, the synthetic diamonds are coming out pretty quickly. And we will have that as an option too, because I believe in being the advocate. So our belief system is to educate you on everything and give you all the choices so that you can decide what's best for you without pushing one thing or pushing another. You know, and that obviously the synthetics at this point don't have any conflict, but as people in Russia start to develop them in little shacks, you know, there's going to be a lot of explosions, but there's, you know, they may not be controlled, but the sources that we deal with are. Does that make sense? I hope I've answered your question, you know, because we don't have the time to go into a lot of depth, but I hope I've answered your question properly. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sir, forgive me, I saw ma'am first.
Have you ever been back to Peru where you grew up?
That's a really good question. Have I ever been back? Well, I'm one of the few people you'll ever meet that left her country illegally but came to America legally. My claim to fame. So as long as the dictator was there, if I had gone back, my passport, even though it was American at this point, still says place of birth Lima, Peru. And the dictator felt very much like he was God and he could keep anyone whose passport said Lima, Peru. So it would have been very dangerous for me to go back while he was still alive. I may not have gotten so lucky the second time. So I did finally go back, and I hadn't been to Machu Picchu and Cusco, and as I was saying earlier, for fun, we did excavating. My father was really big into archaeology. We were such nerds. I loved it. Great childhood. But yeah, it was very, very, very difficult. I will be honest. For those of you that have horrific traumatic events, going back to the place is difficult. I got migraines. I kept throwing up. You really have to face your fears at that point, and there's no hiding it. The memories just flood back. At the same time, it's very healthy. I can't say the word. It's a big word. Cathartic. Come on, help me out here. It's healing. It is good to do that. So, and then I got a chance to go back many, many times and visit my aunts, who are really not my aunts, but back then we call everybody family, We don't want to be my family? It's just, we'll call you cuñado. So thank you. I hope that I have answered your questions. I will be around. I'm going to have lunch and enjoy your hospitality, and I'm going to have dinner. So if any of you have anything that you want to talk about, if any of you have had horrific experiences and just want to chat, I am here for you. Okay? So thank you.